all things dog. This week we have a special guest with us. This is Callie Spurl. That's how you say your last name?
Pearl.
Spurl? Okay. I just want to make sure I got it right. Callie Spurl, who works at the Freckled Paw with Crystal. And so they're just kind of trading off today. So today we are going to be talking about introducing different species in your house. But Callie, do you mind starting by telling us a little bit about your background and how you got into dog training?
Yeah. So I met Crystal in November and kind of started following her around then. And I've been working for her officially since I think like February of this year. But before I started getting into dog training, I was a zookeeper for about 2.5 years full time. And then before that, I was in college. I have a degree in marine science and psychology. And I did a bunch of internships with husbandry. And so I've pretty much always been in the animal business, one way or another, which has recently transitioned into dogs. Animal training is pretty much the same across the board when you're using positive reinforcement. So I have a lot of experience training a lot of different things, which kind of gave me a unique perspective when we went and transferred it over to dogs. There's some things here and there that were a bit different, just because these animals live in your house. But besides that, the concepts are all there. And I was surprised at like how much was the same. But yeah, that's pretty much me in a nutshell. I grew up in Virginia Beach, and then I left, and now I'm back.
Good. Okay, so let's start out. So you have always had, or you've had a cat for the last couple of years, and you just got a dog. So tell us a little bit about each of them.
Yeah, so Charlotte is my cat. I adopted her when I was living in Missouri, and she was kind of just my little roommate. I was really busy with work, and I didn't have time to dedicate to like anything more than a fish. So I got a cat, and kind of just we just kind of worked it out, and she moved around with me while I was in Missouri, and then went on the big trip from Missouri to here, which was very interesting, but that's another topic for another day. And so Charlotte's been with me for a while, and then I adopted Forge back in February, and Charlotte had lived with dogs before with my previous roommates. But they were always separate. Like I never really bothered trying to introduce anybody. So she like knows what dogs are, but she's never like full-time lived in close quarters with a dog. So when I got Forge, I knew that he had some quirks, but as far as we knew, he didn't have any problems with cats. But I still wanted to be careful about that introduction. So I kind of went through the process I would if I was introducing two animals in like a zoological setting.
Sure.
So it's just kind of how I knew how to do things. So we kind of went through.
How would you do it? Yeah, and how would you do it in a zoo setting?
Yeah. So typically how it works is the animals remain separated for a period of time. One, so they can decompress, and two, just so you can assess both of them at the same time. So for me, I live in a fairly small apartment right now. So my cat got the bedroom and my dog stayed out in the living room area. And then at night he went in his crate, and she got free roam in the apartment. She prefers to move around at night anyways. So that way I could give the dog time to decompress because that takes a little bit.
Sure.
And give her time to get used to all the new smells and noises and things that come along with the dog.
Yep.
So that first phase is really about the two kind of decompressing and recognizing that the other exists. So it's pretty much just auditory and some smells, really, but separate. Like at night he was covered, so he couldn't even see her.
Okay.
So I kept out any visual stimulus for at least the first 3 weeks or so.
Okay.
And that's just so they could kind of worry about one thing at a time versus being kind of overstimulated, having to watch the cat run around while he's already kind of wound up from the trans. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So from there, it was more of like giving them some visual access to each other. But he still couldn't physically go after her if he decided he wanted to. I never left them alone together unsupervised.
Yeah, so when you were getting to the point where you were allowing visual access, were you doing it for short periods of time? And then how were you physically managing that situation? Were you using baby gates, or was he on a tether? Like, how were you working through that stage?
Yeah, so with that stage, in zoo terms, they call it a howdy phase. It's a howdy. So it's just, you can see each other and they can, kind of look at each other, but it's through a barrier.
Okay.
So for me, I didn't have any baby gates at the moment and didn't really want to go buy one. So I used just some furniture, basically, and blocked it off so that, he couldn't really get to her. Like, he wasn't going to try, but he could still see her. Baby gates do work wonderfully for that, and I do recommend it. I just wasn't able to buy one at the time. But they do also make baby gates now with cat doors, which is really cool.
So that type of baby gate might actually be good to let you have Charlotte have the closet, really. If you set up that in the closet, she could get through if that made her feel safe.
Yeah, it's a possibility for sure. The way my closet doors are set up, though, it wouldn't work. They're sliding and it's a mess. But, it's a good theory. The only other thing I have with the cat doors that are built into the baby gates is that if your dog can fit through that hole, it doesn't really help.
Yeah, and his biggest forge, what type of dog is he?
He's an Australian cattle dog.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, he's not the tiniest, but, if you were to have a smaller dog, that probably won't do you much good. Yeah. But because I had one at a previous house and my roommate's dog somehow got through it. And we're not really sure how it happened because she wasn't a small dog, but she fit herself through it somehow. So that was my only thing with those. And while they're great in theory, that is something to take in consideration. But
people with multi-pet households use them, like if their dogs are poop eaters, to use that type of door, into the room where the litter box is, so the dogs don't get a nice midday snack.
Yeah, they also make things now that you can stick in your door jamb, so that basically permanently cracks your door open. So big enough the cat can get through, but the dog can't. Nice. Again, your dog isn't super tiny.
Very nice.
Yeah. So there's lots of stuff that they make now. But my main thing was just making sure that I could manage it. I was pretty much with him here the whole time. So they were, like I said, never left in that phase unsupervised. Just in case he did decide to jump the barrier or if something were to fail. I wanted to make sure that I didn't have to like take any steps back. So in that phase where I was letting them see each other, I was making sure that both of them were supervised, and that was kind of my big thing. He still gets kenneled overnight, and you know, that's kind of just a personal choice for me, because I don't want him to get a wild hair in the middle of the night and decide to chase her off.
Yeah.
You know, I've had him 5, 6 months now. But I mean, it's still a work in progress. And that's one of the biggest things that I've told my clients lately is that, you know, the dog and the cat can get to a place where they can coexist fairly peacefully. But, you know, if you have a dog that's prone to chase the cat, you know, your dog's not perfect. You know, they're just doing what they know how to do. So I choose to not leave him out of his kennel unsupervised. And so that also, you know, includes when we're sleeping. I made Forge's crate a happy place, so he sleeps in there and he's fine with it. I haven't gotten any complaints. He likes his alone time. I like my bed to myself. So I'm not mad about it. Everybody wins at that point. So yeah, that howdy phase was kind of where we stayed for a while until I felt like I could trust him a little bit more. So it probably honestly wasn't after like the first 2.5, 3 months before I felt comfortable enough to like leave that down. And even then, I would go and shut my bedroom door occasionally just to give them a break.
Absolutely.
Because that's my biggest thing too, is that these processes are going to go at the pace of whoever's the slowest learner. And typically that's going to be your cat. They're going to be more hesitant to want to interact and to want to come around to the new edition.
Well, because I mean, and typically too, because the dogs are so much bigger, and the cats are the ones who are going to get like they have a lot less to lose typically in these interactions. So it makes sense that they would be more cautious.
Right, and that's, you know, not surprising to me. One of the bigger things I did during that phase too was kind of adding more enrichment to my cat's life.
Very nice.
Yeah, so cat enrichment is a new thing for me. I always felt like my cat just wanted to be left alone. And, you know, she would come and hang out with me sometimes, but, you know, for the most part, she just sits in her window and suns all day. And I was like, I guess that's what she wants. But so I talked with another trainer, Sydney at Clever Critters, and because she had seen some cat clients previously, and I had some questions just kind of about my own situation, and I was helping a friend out at the same time, you know, about what kinds of things I can do for her to make her feel more comfortable and more confident. And just like with dogs and literally every animal ever, enrichment is kind of the key. It was one of those things to me where I was like, duh, like, why haven't I been doing this the whole time?
Well, especially from a zoo background too, because I mean, I know that zoos pay a ton of attention to enrichment and for all different animals. I mean, it makes sense that if it's true of every other animal, you know, you come across in a zoo, right? And then it is for dogs too, and I know it is for birds. Like, of course it is for cats, but somehow and maybe that's different in other countries, but I feel like here we definitely have that, like, oh, well, cats just do their own thing. They're not interested.
Right. And so that was my big, like, oh, duh. Like, why didn't I ever put those two things together? Because, you know, I've been a zookeeper for so long. I have done enrichment for every animal under the sun. I've given enrichment to snakes. Why did I decide that the house cat doesn't need enrichment. I have no idea.
So going forward with enrichment, I mean, I know a little bit of cat enrichment just from doing on the pet sitting side, but I do know that it's just now starting to become a thing in pet stores where they're offering some different like foraging and puzzle type toys. Did you struggle with what types of enrichment to use for her, or did she struggle with enrichment in the beginning?
So one of the biggest things I started with was kind of changing up her feeding strategy. Again, like these are things I had done for years with other things, and I just, again, I don't know, house cats. And cats are hunters. Cats are not dogs. Dogs are scavengers. They should be fed differently. So, occasionally, putting her food in something besides just the same dish was probably a good idea. So we started to play this kind of fun game where I took a bunch of different bowls in different shapes and sizes and put like little bits of her food and stashed it in places in the house.
Okay.
And while during the day, she obviously wasn't coming out and eating the stuff that was like in the kitchen. But I found that overnight she was definitely going around and like eating out of all the bowls. And I started to see kind of a bigger difference in just how fast she was acclimating to the dog and how much more she was like coming out and demanding food in the middle of the day. Because she's still not really on board with her diet. But she's getting there. And that's one of the other big things too, is that most people's cats are overweight. I know that's a really general statement, but I mean, most cats I have met are overweight.
To be honest, those dogs we meet could lose a few pounds too. I mean,
Right. And I'm like, I can say that about a lot of different things, but my big goal for her was to get her back down to a more healthy weight because she gained some weight during this process because she wasn't leaving the room and she was hiding all day. So I started trying to find ways to encourage her to move around and be more active, to eat smaller meals and kind of spread it out a bit more. So, I found some slow feeder bowls, so she would have to pick the food out. I found these little mice feeders.
so
Yeah,
mice, right? Colored mice, and they have a hole in the top that you can put in. I have found that dry treats work better than wet food, even though the material made me think wet food would be great. It's just a pain to clean out. But yeah, treats, dry food, that kind of thing.
yeah. So we started doing that more. I started doing a little bit of training with her, which she's still like trying to understand, but it was a lot of me just sitting there like, can you do a nose touch? And she usually like would touch my finger with like her whole forehead, but whatever works for her. Cats have super sensitive whiskers, so I imagine a nose touch is probably harder for them. So I just kind of work with her and go off of what she's telling me. One of her favorite things is just when I sit there and toss treats across the room.
Yeah.
And that's like her favorite game. But there's all sorts of things you can do with them, just to try and make their lives a little bit better. Because I thought I was doing the right thing by leaving her alone. But I was doing her a bit of an injustice, like just assuming she didn't need any mental stimulation other than watching stuff outside out the window.
Well, and when you're talking about doing these, especially the training things too, even though it is her, and actually I meant to think about it too when you're talking about how as a target she was using her forehead instead of her nose. But dogs use their snouts and their noses to investigate things all the time. But cats, one of the first things they'll do is they'll like do a side, they'll rub up against something. And so it makes sense that she wouldn't use, like, I don't, it's not even called a snout on a cat. I'm not sure what it's called. Is it called a snout? I don't know. But, you know, it makes sense that she wouldn't use that area of her face because that's not how cats like interact with things that they're, you know, they're kind of unsure about. So when you're doing these training exercises too, we know with dogs that when you start working with them and you kind of have that, it's like a different understanding with each other. That works. I find it particularly in reactive dogs or when you're talking about loose leash walking, when you build that connection and that focus, your animal starts to trust you more and trust you in situations where they're not feeling comfortable because they know that there is a level of understanding there and they can look at you and say, hey, I'm not loving this. And you can help facilitate them out of that situation or do something to make it better for them. So all of that is really useful. What were you doing with Forge on the other side to, like, were you doing any kind of like emergency recall stuff with him or, you know, look at that game? What types of skills were you working on with Forge so that their interactions were going well?
Yeah, so, you know, throughout the whole process of Forge's transition into our house, you know, he was getting lots of enrichment and doing training. And, you know, as far as the direct cat stuff, it was a lot of like, hey, like, can you sit on the couch while the cat moves around and eat some treats? Doing a little bit of the, you know, engage, disengage kind of games where it's like, can you look at the cat? And then can you eat this treat? And then eventually, you know, it's, can you look at me when the cat is around instead of just paying attention to the cat? So it's a lot of, you know, he has a pretty solid station. So, you know, chasing the cat is not ideal, but I would be lying if I said that he never did it. You know, there were times where he did run after the cat. And so that's when it's like, hey, I'm going to have you sit on your station for a while and giving him something else to do. Because I found that the few instances where he has chased the cat, it was either one, because she surprised him, two, because he was bored, or, you know, three, because he was, you know, missing one of his needs, basically. So that's, you know, on me at that point. And so when the cat does come around at night now, he either will get to stay on the couch and eat some treats, and if he decides he wants to chase after her or looks like he's going to chase after her, I'll put him on his station so he has a job to do other than chase the cat, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing people ask us when we, you know, I'm sure you've got it too when you're starting mat work with them. They're like, oh, what do I use this for?
Everything.
Don't you use this for? You can use this for everything.
Everything.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's all good. So were you doing any kind of like emergency tether thing for him or something? Or did you just know that she was faster and she was going to get out of the way? How were you kind of managing those first few, like, okay, everyone's in the room together. How are we going to do this?
Yeah, so unfortunately, most of those times initially where like they ended up in the same room together, I was not prepared at all. It was one of those situations where like she just decided to come out and I didn't think she was going to. I have a very strong history of underestimating my cat. Basically is what I'm saying. And so it was very much on the fly, like, you know, half the time he's sitting on the couch with my boyfriend. And so I'm like, hey, can you feed him for that, please?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we keep jars of treats kind of stashed around for those situations. I've never had to tether him, but I know for a lot of like planned meetings where you know the cat's going to come around, that can be a useful tool to kind of play some engage, disengage safely. Unfortunately, with the way my cat is, she likes to keep me on my toes. And you know, I'm not going to go in and grab her and make her come out and play with the dog, because that's a bad idea. So it's just kind of been, I have to be prepared for whenever she's ready to come out. she seems to know when he's sleeping, and that tends to be her favorite time to run around. Um, and so most of the time, like if he's on the couch sleeping, like we can just feed him some treats and keep his attention. And that seems to work really well for us. But, you know, some people have cats who are very social and are a lot more bold than that. Some people have cats that won't do that at all. So you kind of have to cater to what your animals are doing, and what signals they're giving you. You know, lately my cat has started coming out more while my dog is awake. So I'm currently trying to find a good place for them. And she's decided she likes to nap in the closet again all of a sudden. So I'm kind of constantly adapting what I'm doing with them based off of the progress my cat is making and what my dog is doing. But it's kind of just an ever-evolving thing.
Well, because that's the way learning and behavior is. I mean, we're always, yeah, yeah, it's an always changing thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
where are you guys at right now with everything? How are you feeling about where you guys are?
Yeah, so what's been working for us lately is, you know, just taking the information they're giving us. I'm pretty much always prepared with snacks. I keep up Forge's station. Like I said, I use that for everything all the time. And continuing adapting the cat's enrichment plan as well. And you know, it's just management from here, really, making sure that they are still safe around each other. And so, you know, it's one of those things where if she decides to get really bold and pop up onto bed with me and him, which she's done a couple times now, I will, you know, talk to the dog. And, you know, a lot of times, like if I'm in bed, I generally don't have treats on me.
Yep.
I was like, he sits in bed with me in the mornings sometimes. So I'll pet him and I'll, you know, generally he has a toy somewhere nearby, or I'll, you know, give him his toy to play with and let her interact with him on her terms. You know, and it's a lot of just kind of spur of the moment interactions that come up during the day. And again, like they're still not left together unsupervised because I don't want to be liable for them deciding to get into it randomly one day. Right. And so, you know, it's one of those things where it's a constant management thing. You know, I can't expect them to just get along with each other all of a sudden out of nowhere. You know, dogs and cats are very different. And while, you know, there are some cats who love their dog friends, my cat is not one of those. She is a little bit of a lone ranger. But she still is getting curious about him and like wanting to come up and sniff him. So I generally will work through different training behaviors with him and let her do her thing. And I just let her
Good
do
job.
it at her own pace.
Yeah. 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 So that's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. It's been a very big learning process for me, you know, as well as them. Trying to figure out what works the best, and you know, sometimes I just have to make things up as I go along. um, but you know, that's just me being real about it. You know, they have made a lot of progress. He really doesn't bother her. He will occasionally, with the closet thing lately, he's decided that that's kind of fun. And he wants to play with her in the closet. So I went through and just shut my closet.
Yeah. Yeah. Poor Charlotte.
I know. We have like one spot open enough where like she can get in and out if she wants, but not enough that like he's gonna try and corner her in there anymore. And so, like I said, it's an ever evolving, ever adapting thing. And I'm just taking cues from them. If there's days where I feel like he's super worried about what she's doing, I will just shut the door to my bedroom, make sure she's got food and water in there in her litter box, and we're good to go.
Everybody has those days where they just can't do the thing. Like, and obviously a lot of work for Forge to not go bother Charlotte. And so on the days where I tell people all the time, especially with puppies, like there will be days where the puppy just cannot do anything except bite you. Like, and trying to train through it is pointless. They're just not in that mind frame. We all have bad days. So on those days, it just rework the plan. It's okay to take a day where we move back a step and no one interacts. I mean, obviously with your puppy, you got to go let them out to pee and do the things. I'm not saying you shut them away and, in a closet forever, but, there will be days where they spend a lot more time in a nice pen with a good chew toy, or where Forge will hang out in his room and Charlotte will hang out in her room, and they don't need to interact on those days. Because
absolutely. And I can't even tell you that, like, that's not something we're still doing. We're still doing that a lot. There are some days where he just can't contain himself. I have to make not chasing her more reinforcing than chasing her is, because chasing her is reinforcing in itself because it's fun.
Behavior. I mean, it's hard to work against that type of genetics and biology. I mean,
right. And that's one of those things that, I'm trying to reassure my clients of all the time, is that, it's a natural behavior for them to chase things. Like, it's a part of, their prey drive and how they work as an animal. So asking them not to do that, it's hard. And so I have to make it worth his time to not just go do that. And it's not that he's being malicious or that he wants to eat her, or, he doesn't have ill intentions. It's just fun. And so there are days where he's not using his brain and he thinks that chasing her is way more fun than the snacks I have. And so, that's one of the things where I have to kind of decide, either I'm going to separate them, close the door to the room, let him hang out in his crate with a Kong or something for a little bit. And, it's management at this point.
Well, and part of working through those types of more like biological behaviors too, I always find it's useful to approach it kind of from two sides. You want to do the management side, so obviously he cannot chase her on those days, but then also providing him a way to get that out, because he needs to get it out. I mean, it's what dogs do. Some dogs have really high prey drive and they need to chase the thing, so giving him other outlets. So you're doing sports with him, which is great. For other people, you can use flirt pole, give them something appropriate to chase instead of the cat. And then, some people think that will make it more like chase, but it's not. It's putting rules around chase. These are things we chase and these are things we don't. It's okay here and you can have all the fun. You cannot chase here. Like, it's just two different scenarios. And dogs usually pick those things up pretty quickly.
Yeah, so Forge is a Australian cattle dog. They are, super, super fun. But he's a lot sometimes. He's got a lot of drive, and so much drive. And so I have to find appropriate outlets for his energy, and I have to be responsible for making sure that he is being fulfilled and that his needs are being fulfilled. He's not a couch dog. He's not going to sit around and, do nothing all day. He needs something to do with his brain and with his energy. So we do lots of sports. I take him on decompression walks. Right now it's really hot. And we obviously can't get outside that much. So it's, lots of extra enrichment, all of the pool days, finding other places for him to exert his energy other than on the cat. So that's kind of been my biggest, challenge here lately is finding things for him to do when it's so hot. So lots of enrichment. He loves to swim, so we do a lot of swimming. But keeping him safe, keeping her safe is always my top priority. So I work with what they're giving me, and if I feel like it's going to be a bad day for him because he hasn't gotten to go outside in like 2 days because it's been so hot, it's like you guys are going to just stay separate, and I'm going to avoid the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to just go with what I've got.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I think that's probably a good spot to kind of wrap things up. Was there anything else about this that you really like were dying to talk about? Something you expected or didn't expect, or?
Yeah, I mean, no, my biggest thing really through this was learning more about my cat, and not just, letting her live here and just exist. Trying to interact with her more, trying to take time out of my day to spend with her so that she wasn't feeling like I was like picking the dog out over her. Like, because that was my biggest thing is I didn't want her to feel like left out, because it had been just me and her for so long. And that's, partly me just being emotional, and partly underestimating my cat a little bit. And I wanted to make sure that I was doing all I could for her. So adding in that enrichment and really looking into more of what cats need versus, just going with what I had been doing, which wasn't much, honestly. I didn't think she wanted to do anything.
Yeah.
But she very much did. I just didn't know. I educated myself, formed a new opinion, and we went on with it. And she loves her little mice things. She's working on some station training right now.
Very nice. That's cool.
Yeah, so my goal is to hopefully get them stationed together and trying to do some like, I don't know, big goal right now, but is trying to get them to do a little bit of training together. And so I'm just trying to figure out the best way to do that. And she's, still kind of on her own schedule, but those are the big goals for right now is just, keeping them in a positive space, and working with them both on their confidence and seeing how it goes. I'm kind of just taking it one day at a time still.
You're doing everything right, though. I mean, you guys are on a good path. You're making progress. And really, I think people do a lot of times, they rush it. They expect, like, even a lot of times people are like, oh, well, we've already had the dog a month and it's not better yet. And it's like, well, it's not going to be perfect in a month. You need to ease into these things. It takes time. I mean, both of them, their whole worlds are upside down and they need time to adjust to that. As with any training, there's no magic pill. It doesn't happen overnight.
The biggest thing I've learned from all of my experiences and all of the training that I've done is that you can't put a timeline on behavior modification. You just can't. You can't put a timeline on any training plan because then you have expectations that are not realistic. Your animal is a living, thinking being, and it is going to make progress at its own pace, and it's not really predictable.
Yeah.
So managing my own expectations has been a big part of this as well. Not expecting them to be friends overnight, and not panicking either because they're not getting along. And so that's one of my things where I know I'm like, I've been training animals for quite a while now, and I'm like, am I doing something wrong, and kind of questioning myself. But just kind of assessing my expectations, seeing how they're doing, and kind of going from there.
Well, I mean, and it's really, when you stop and think about it, the whole thing is just kind of crazy. Like, doing animal of the same species interactions are tough enough as they are, which you know from working in zoo world. And then you throw in like, it's really 3 different species living together and learning how to live together, because don't forget, like, dogs don't just naturally know how to live with humans. We have to teach them.
Exactly.
Cats, I mean, cats tend to often do their own thing, but like, that's crazy. I mean, think about any other 2 animal species that you would just bring in your home to live with you. It would be chaos. It would be nuts. So sometimes we do have our expectations set pretty high. And just like with our dogs, you know, we talk a lot about like setting them up for success. We need to set ourselves up for success too, because if you have these expectations and you keep failing at them, it's frustrating, and it, you know, it makes you feel like crap, and you just feel like that's not how you want to go through things. So having more realistic expectations, like you said, and learning to work through at their pace is really, I think that's key.
Yeah, you have to look at each animal kind of as an individual, and I mean, even yourself at that point, and assess, you know, where each individual is at and how it's working. And, you know, it's a complex structure. You know, it's not just kumbaya all the time. Like, you know, there's some days where I'm just too tired to deal with it. And so we just have to figure something else out, and I've got to manage, you know, my expectations for that day, and, you know, move forward from there. And it's a, you know, kind of fluid, like I said, ever changing thing, and taking step backward is totally normal. You know, even with all the progress we've made, we still have bad days, and I can't expect us not to.
Yeah. All right. So on
that was on a happy note, but they're doing good. They're doing good.
Yeah.
It is possible. It is.
Yeah. Yeah.
They will get there. It just takes time.
Well, I mean, they're still in a good place now. You know, it's so much better to go slow and have things move slow than to have a few like major mishaps that then you have to work through all of that too. Like, think about what would happen if Forge somewhere along the way had gotten a hold of Charlotte, and then trying to help Charlotte back through that trauma. You have a much longer road ahead of you. So it makes sense to go slow and just take your time and let them go at their pace. And obviously, above everything else, keep everyone safe.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I mean, he's still crated when I'm not home, when I'm sleeping. I mean, he's not left out alone. And it's not because I don't trust him. It's just, you know, I've only had him since February.
Yeah, it's okay to not trust them, though. I mean, like, animals, and we don't know what they're thinking. They cannot tell us what they're thinking. So it's okay to not trust it. I tell people that with, you know, dogs and kids all the time. Like, they're, you know, it's not crazy to think that I can't 100,000% trust my dog with my kid all the time. Dogs do crazy things, kids do crazy things, and cats do crazy things, and dogs do crazy things, and, you know, you can't trust 100%.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're not wrong. That's kind of my big thing. You know, with management, still, it's just like I'm not leaving them alone together because my anxiety can't handle it. And I, you know, don't necessarily trust him to the fullest extent at this point. And like I said, he hasn't been here that long at all. So, and that's something I have to remind myself of pretty consistently, is that he's still in a transition, you know, we're still working on it.
Ask you too, I kind of forgot about, have you done anything for Charlotte on the side of, like, have you made any changes to your house along with the enrichment and stuff to kind of benefit her, how she moves through the house, that kind of thing? Have you done
that? So I had to move her litter box for one. I had to make sure that her litter box was in a place where she felt safe. So I had to move some stuff around and make sure that she had access to it. in a place where she didn't feel like the dog was going to come after her, because the last thing I needed was her having accidents in the house. So I had to make sure that, you know, her litter box was accessible and in a safe spot for her. I cleared off some stuff on my desk. We live in a very small space, so I was trying to make sure that she had accesses to vertical spaces, because cats utilize vertical space more than they do horizontal. So, you know, making sure my windowsills were kind of cleared off for her. She likes to hide in the windows, and, you know, just making sure that she had safe spaces to go to during all of this was kind of key, that the dog couldn't access. So, you know, like my closet and the countertops and this and that, and just kind of making sure that she could get somewhere if she needed to, where he couldn't get to her.
Yeah,
Lots of hiding holes and stuff.
A lot of people buy the floating shelves and kind of put floating shelves in different areas that the cats can kind of move around. I mean, ideally, and it's again tough because you live in an apartment, and so you know, you don't want to be making holes all over the place in the walls. But ideally, if they can make it totally around a room without ever touching the ground or having to be near the dog, that's usually a way to, you know, help them, especially because they can go sit out there and observe the dog without having to interact. Of course, sometimes that can lead to cats who tease the dog a little bit. But, you know, they kind of deserve it, you know?
Yeah. So, you know, it's one of those things where, like, she has a favorite window she likes to hang out in. So I, like, put curtains up so that, you know, she could kind of feel safer, and hide behind the curtain and still get to be in her window. You know, she's got a little house that she can go into if she wants. Her favorite spot is still my box spring. She destroyed my box spring like a year ago. And that's her little fortress down there. But, you know, making sure she had access to those places, and making sure she had escape routes was also super important.
All right, so I think that's good. I mean, I think the biggest key takeaway, actually, I think you had a few really good ones, is making sure that both animals' needs are met. And for your cat, that usually means a lot more than you're doing, just because we tend to think that we're self-sufficient. So making sure everyone's needs are met, moving at their pace.
Yeah.
Cues from them. Obviously, management always. Yeah, and I think that's about it.
Yeah, it's pretty much all management, enrichment.
Yeah, and then working on the skills with each of them too. You know, like working with Forge on look at that game and stationing. That's really important to how he interacts with her. Yeah. All right. So that's our show for today of All Things Dog. Thank you, Callie, for joining us today. Callie,
absolutely.
People find you and Forge on the social media?
Yeah, so obviously the Freckled Paw Facebook page is, you know, has Forge on there occasionally. He does have his own Instagram, which the cat does make appearances on as well. It's at Forge_the cattle dog. He's got all sorts of stuff on there. I do picture videos of his training, and there's some cat stuff on there as well. I put all of his sports stuff on there. It's really obnoxious.
I love it.
But he's on Instagram.
I'll follow you right
now. Should. Absolutely.
So yeah, so that's it for today. And as always, you can reach Crystal at freckledpaw.com. And her Facebook and Instagram. Everything's at the Freckled Paw, which is wonderful, easy to remember.
It is.
Yeah. Crystal will be back for our next episode. And that's it. So we'll see you soon. Bye.